Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I'm very happy to welcome Frances Drost here. And she is an author, a singer, songwriter, recording artist, and a speaker. So we're going to get to know her, have a great conversation. So, Frances, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thanks, Kyle. I am all of those things that you said. Plus, I love to work in my garden and I have cats. I'm an animal lover. I was a farm girl, so I just can't seem to get away from digging in the dirt. That's kind of my therapy when I'm not doing music. So I'm married. I've been married. It'll be 35 years in September. Can't believe it. But so that's kind of me in a nutshell. I used to be a motorcycle rider, and my husband did too. So that was our favorite thing to do, but we had to give that up for some physical disability my husband has, and it just was getting too risky. So we actually got a Jeep recently, a used Jeep. So now we're off-roading in the mountains of Pennsylvania and absolutely loving that.
That's crazy because I have problems with my spine and I can't ride anymore either.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's hard to give it up.
Yeah, it definitely sucks. So I was reading your story and it mentioned the fact that you did not celebrate Christmas one year. What happened there?
Yeah, I had grown up celebrating Christmas, definitely, and was in a community of faith where we celebrated Christmas. But I had noticed over time, long period of time, that I just had this sadness that would come over the holidays. And I felt guilty about it because you shouldn't have sadness at the holidays. And I've learned in the second half of my life to pay attention to things that unsettle me. I think I used to probably just ignore them or just be so busy that I would crowd them out. But in the later years of my 30s, I was like, what if I would just stop and pay attention to that discomfort around the holidays? And I was actually, it happened in a Christmas shop. It was September, and my husband and I were on a 10th wedding anniversary trip. And he got really sick with the stomach virus. So he was in the hotel room throwing up, and I decided to go over to this Christmas shop next door. And first I walked in, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Sparkles, ornaments, just beautiful trees, glitter everywhere. And then in the moment I was like, this kind of actually feels like my life. I feel like my life has lots of sparkly things, but I feel like I'm missing something here. And so in that moment, in that store, I just felt impressed, like, well, why don't you just stop and pay attention to that pain? And so I did. And I thought, I'm not going to do shopping. I'm not going to decorate. I just took kind of a really strong step and talked to my husband about it. Some people say, how do you do that? And I said, well, you just talk to your family about it and say, hey, what if we try a different approach this year and not get caught up in all the frenzy of the holidays and just go for more of a quiet, observant route. So he was all in, probably because that meant he didn't have to think of what to buy me for Christmas. Just on a real practical level. But so that year, it seemed like as I got quiet and just paid attention, I started having some deeper understanding of my life and bigger perspective. And of course, I'm a songwriter. So I began writing songs out of that period. And I'd already done recordings and so forth before, but I could just feel a Christmas album brewing and a Christmas story. And I began to realize our family, I knew in my head that our family had been through a lot of tragedy, and I'd lost a couple siblings to farm accidents. And so my head knew that there was a lot of tragedy and reason to be sad, but my heart felt guilty if I was sad and contemplative. And so I just kind of ignored that part of my life until that Christmas. And so I started writing music about it, my experience, and 10, 14 years later, I guess it was, I did an album. And then I was like, the more I shared just a little bit of my story, I found out that there were a lot of other people who struggled with the holidays, but nobody wanted to say that. Like, who wants to be a downer, right?
Right.
So, but I was like, I think there's a place for me to do a Christmas event, Christmas concert, share my music that I've written around Christmas, and do a professional show, but put that personal touch on it and kind of give people permission to say, oh, the holidays can be challenging. And so I felt like, over time of just paying attention to my soul and looking for clues. One of the last song on my album is Take Another Look. And I feel like that just kind of sums up my experience with Christmas that year. I just stopped to take another look at my feelings and the clues that it was giving me. And that led to amazing self-discovery. It also revealed, holidays, duh. If everything is perfect in your life and your family, they're great. But in our family, we were missing people at the holidays. And my siblings that are still living were much older than me. And so by the time I was mid-teens, they were gone from home. So Christmas felt really, really lonely. And that's when I first really began to realize that, this is just leftover grief. And I've seen that pattern now in my life. I feel like I can more quickly identify now when grief is kind of weighing me down and holding me back from experiencing the joyful parts of life. There was joyful parts of life for me, but I couldn't seem to find those. I couldn't seem to focus on those. I was always drawn to the sadness and melancholy. And that really started a whole journey in my life of paying more attention to what I was writing, how I was writing it. And my producer started pointing out, Frances, you write a lot of sad songs for coming from a faith community. I'm like, I never noticed that. And as it turns out, he was right. As I had to go back and rewrite a lot of my songs, I found that I often tended to create a scenario or a story around death in my songs. And I didn't even realize I was doing that. So it took some outside people looking in and going, there's a pattern here you might want to pay attention to. And when I started paying attention to that, it's like, this all makes sense. So I actually continued writing my music and sharing myself authentically, but then trying to share the whole journey, not just the sadness, but the journey of moving from that into more joy. And so it's hard to share that in a nutshell, but that's what happened.
That first Christmas after my brother had passed away, I think was the hardest. I lost some people in the family, but my brother and I were close.
Hmm.
And even though there was a 7 years difference between us, and he had taken his own life just several months before that. My daughter was already a couple of years old, and then I had my two boys after that. I guess putting the focus on them made Christmas a lot easier.
Hmm.
And then,
Wow.
of course, they grow up and they want to do their own thing. When they're teenagers, it's just not the same anymore.
Hmm.
Christmas got sad again, and then here comes the grandkids.
Here comes the joy, huh?
That's right.
The bundles of joy. Yeah. I'm glad you shared a little bit of your story, because I'm sure my fans will listen to this and they would love to know, how you relate to this story, and that's a great way to share. So he was 7 years older or younger? Younger. Wow. And how old were you when this happened?
want to say I was just about to turn 30.
Wow.
So he would have been about, he was 22 when he passed away.
Okay. Wow.
And I guess what made it even sadder was the fact that he had hung himself right behind my grandparents' house. And this is where we
Wow.
gathered for the holiday.
Wow. Wow. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I didn't face that of the feelings that I should have felt. I drowned it with the alcohol and drugs, and it got bad. It got really, really bad, and it finally led to my marriage ending.
Wow. We can all insert different things that we feel that pain with, or fill that void with, or try to avoid the pain. It's just different for everybody. It's not a, I always say grief and pain are not a scheduled appointment, or they just show up in the strangest times, the strangest ways. But we all, I think for me, my way to process my pain was writing my music and letting it come out through that. And so as an artist, sometimes the struggle is, how authentic do you be? You don't want to pull everybody down with your real life experience. So I used to try to adjust who I am and adjust my writing, and I would still say I do, just trying to learn to be as effective as I can in my communication. But I also have come to realize that my story is not for everybody, and there are people who love the holidays, and they don't want their joy tainted by any sadness or somebody's sad story. But I just thought, you know what, I just share my story, and it does connect with some people and it doesn't with others, and that's okay. But we all have things that I think we try to feel better with, and some are more destructive to us than others. Some things you can see on the outside, some things you can't see, but it's still just as destructive.
We have to go through those feelings, as hard as they may be. We have to face those feelings, because I didn't. It manifested in physical ailments as well as mental problems. It's strange that when you look at society now, they do everything they can to keep you from feeling the feelings you should be feeling.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Especially with drugs and things like that.
Yeah. And if you don't have something to replace it with, or someone to walk with you, no, in my case, at least, finding somebody to walk with me and to help me understand what I was going through was crucial.
What was the first song that you wrote after that whole not having Christmas?
I can't remember the chronological order so much, but I know that one key one was the Take Another Look. I actually, in the Christmas store, heard the lyric and the melody, but I didn't sit down and pay attention to it until a few months later. It actually came back to me when I was doing something technical on my computer, and suddenly I heard the rest of the melody and the lyrics, and I thought, I need to pay attention to that idea. So I sat down at the piano, and so that Take Another Look would have been one of the ones that I get ideas, and then it might take me a long time to actually sit down and follow them and pay attention to them. So another one early on was called Miracles. So I was reading the nativity story, I had heard that story so much that I almost felt like I had become numb to it, and like I could recite it, but I felt like I had lost connection with it.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, one way I'll start is just read that story. And I think when I set aside all the other stuff around it, I just saw some things in that story I'd never seen before, supernatural things, and it just struck me as miracles. So I started one of the songs that I wrote out of that was miracles. And in an ironic kind of way, I was craving my own miracle, like my own, I needed an intervention is how I felt.
What was your, I mean, apparently you came through it pretty good. What was your intervention?
I wish I could say it was one moment that everything changed and everything was perfect and I felt better. And it wasn't. It was a gradual combination of self-awareness, discovery, understanding how grief can impact families and siblings long after you've lost them. I feel like it was really a 4 or 5, even 10-year process. I mean, I released the album in 2013, so it's 11 years later. I would say in halfway through this, I began to realize, I actually don't dread Christmas anymore. But it wasn't because there was one big moment when I went, oh, great, I feel amazing. It was a gentle, very slow, methodic, almost like going to physical therapy or something when you break a bone, or you do a long journey of work around it, and you pay attention. And I did a lot of journaling. And so to this day, I would say I feel so much better, but I maybe the healing came in a better way than if it was just instant. I feel like I know how to handle grief when it comes in any kind of form or through any kind of, I mean, the pandemic created another kind of grief, right? A lot of loss around what we knew, what our normal routines. So I now look at some of my friends and some of the situations, go, I think they're grieving and they don't even realize it. I think our world is grieving from the pandemic and doesn't even know it. Like, it's post-traumatic stress stuff happening because there was such a huge shift in our culture and how things were done during that time. So to me, I kind of go, there's a clue of grief. I know that feeling. So doing the hard work, though it took a long time, I feel like it's paid off in the long run, because now I feel like I have I don't want to say systems, that feels really just utilitarian, but I'm just more aware, more quickly able to identify, why do I feel this way today? Like, what is this? Am I making sense? I can't point to one specific thing. I wish I could. Some people can, they might say, I just remember the moment I was totally different. Mine came slowly over time.
The thing that makes me feel the most joy is being around, of course, the family in general, but the grandkids.
Hmm.
I did this with my own children, kind of live vicariously through them.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more sentimental I get.
Aw.
I miss being a kid.
Hmm.
I find
Yeah.
myself now crying sometimes because I miss being a kid.
Yeah. What do you miss about being a kid? What do you think you
Wow.
miss?
Wow. How do I get into this without starting to cry?
I know you're supposed to be the one who asks the questions, right?
Of course, the main thing is I had someone to take care of me, and I didn't have to worry about bills, and I knew food was always going to be on the table, and I was always going to have a roof over my head and that kind of thing. But just like I say, just being a kid. You get to run and play, and you don't have to worry about society and all that. You just be a kid.
Yeah.
And I mean, the 70s for me was the best time of my life.
Wow.
And my grandparents, when they were younger and they could do more, I got to spend time with my grandparents and we did things. And I still remember them going out and playing with me in the yard, and we play in the sand pile and that kind of thing. As my kids came on the scene, well, the grandparents couldn't get around as well. And my daughter was fortunate enough that she got to spend a lot of time with them, and they played tea and dolls and all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
with her. But as they got up in their years, they couldn't get around, and then they started getting dementia. It just wasn't the same. And I miss grandparents a lot.
Yeah, I do too. I relate to that. And now you get to be that to your grandkids. Like you're filling those shoes. You know what? That reminds me, speaking of childhood and playing, and I forgot there's a part of the story I didn't include in my book. I feel like it's going to be in a different book because it's just a different part of the story. But one of the key things that did help me was play. Of all things, I went to see a counselor, and she did not give me advice, I guess, like I thought I would get, like, go home and journal, go home, do this, do this. She just asked me, she said, what do you love to do for fun? What did you love to do for fun? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I love to play the piano, but it's my life now. It's my business. And I don't think that's what you're talking about. And then I remembered that ice skating. I loved ice skating when I was a kid. We had a farm, and so I grew up ice skating. And I would take a boom box out onto the pond, and I would make up, that was the days when Dorothy Hamill was the thing, and I would try to do stuff that Dorothy Hamill was doing on skates. And so here later in my 40s, I decided, maybe I need to go back and just do something fun that ties me back to childhood. So I took up figure skating. Actually, I'd never had a figure skating lesson. I just tried to figure things out on my own, but I hired a figure skating coach, and it changed my life. Now that I think about it, I remember one moment on the ice one day when a very professional skater came in just for one morning to do her routine. And when a professional steps on the ice, everybody backs away and lets them do their choreographed song, and then everybody picks up skating again. And I watched her skate, and it was just incredible to see someone right there on the ice in front of me do the beautiful stuff, do it so well and so gracefully to her music. And when she was done, we all started skating again. And I happened to notice in the middle of the rink a very beautiful mark in the ice that was a perfect spiral from her skates, from one of the spiral spins she had done. And I just remember that was a moment when I realized that how much my life had been changing because I had done something fun. I guess, what it really is, it was a distraction from life. For 2 hours on the ice every day, I didn't have to think about anything else. And I just listened to the music, and I was learning how to dance on the ice, and it was transforming. And I think a lot of it was just that it was something joyful. It was something fun. It was childhood related. It was the kind of stuff that I would have done as a girl, but I had just totally lost sight of that. And when I speak to audiences, I often use that. I don't know why it didn't pop in my brain until now. But I guess just you're mentioning childhood, and what I say to people, what is your ice skating? Like, especially as adults, we lose we lose the element of play and childhood in our life because we just get so burdened down with life and, like you said, paying bills and everything. And I think it's important for us to stay healthy mentally and physically, is to incorporate something that we just love and we lose ourselves in. What would you say ice skating is for you? Like, what is it now for you?
Oh,
Besides your grandchildren?
now,
Or maybe,
that's hard to say. That's one I'll have to think about. What is my ice skating now? Outside of playing with the grandkids. See, I'm just not prepared to answer questions.
no. Well, you can always send me a message later and say, I remembered my ice skating.
It's strangely enough, I think reading, sitting down and reading and getting really into a book where you can imagine being the characters and not being
Yeah.
yourself.
That sounds like a key. I think that's the common denominator, is you're able to get outside yourself and think about something else.
Yeah, it's good to get away from real life for a while. You have how many books now?
Well, I have two. One is my first one was self-published, and my new one coming out, Portraits of White, is published. I got through a publisher, and so that's coming out in stores in October this year. So like two completely different journeys, but I love knowing stories behind the songs. Even as I get older, I'm more and more interested in a song that I like. I'll go research, so what was the story behind it? And so through that lens, I wanted to share the stories behind my songs. So the first book was for a different album, and it really is just the stories behind the songs. Where my second book, I was like, now that I'd done one, I'm like, there's more than just the stories behind the songs of a songwriter. There's their overall life story and how your songwriting fits into that. And so my second book, as I was writing down the stories, I saw the bigger picture from a different view. And that book became more about my journey with Christmas and I say holidays. It was the publisher who wanted to put more just the holidays. I'm like, I like that, because every holiday that we have has emotions around it. Mother's Day, Father's Day, Memorial Day is challenging for me, because that was the last holiday I spent with my father before he passed away. He actually died the week of Memorial Day. And now that I don't have a mother or a father, they're both gone. Mother's Day and Father's Day can be difficult. And so I'm like, you're right. Holidays, I feel like what I learned from taking another look was that holidays can amplify loss. And I found that half the battle is just knowing, okay, that's what that is. I'm feeling sad. I acknowledge it. I miss my dad. I miss a family gathering where we all get together and have dinner around the table. I miss my grandparents. It's just an acknowledgement of you know what? This is sadness, and it's okay. It's part of life. I get it. And now I can move forward. And so, though the book and my story is really about Christmas, it fits other holidays, and just paying attention to our own hearts and souls, and if there's pain points, not running away from them, but looking at what they are and then moving forward from there.
I wonder, as we get older and like our parents and grandparents have passed on, we are now stepping into that role of the matriarchy and patriarchy of the family, and our own lives are coming closer to an end.
Yeah.
maybe that's why we feel like we do when we get older.
Yeah, I remember my mother died 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and she was 90, this is terrible, 91. But the older she got, the more she would say, I really miss my parents. And I remember thinking, well, that seems odd. But now that I'm getting older, I think I understand what she was talking about. You just miss, I think it's kind of that kid thing. You miss that security of having your parents and the foundation. Even if it wasn't a perfect relationship, you miss the feeling of that foundation. And when they pass on, you feel like you've lost your foundation. And now I feel like I understand what she was talking about. Like, you just miss that feeling of being a kid and being cared for and looked after. So, but you get to be that person in your how many grandchildren do you have?
3 grandsons.
Wow. That's great.
But it's cool to be a kid again and get on the floor and play with them, and plus you're making moments.
Yeah.
One day they're going to be saying, wow, I miss Grandpa being around. We used to have fun.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to purchase your books, where do they go to get them?
Well, everything's on my website, francesdrost.com. So in music, streaming, all that stuff, you can find it from there. So
Your social media?
Yes, it's on there. Facebook. I'm mostly a Facebook and YouTube person. I'm on Instagram, but I have to confess I'm not real engaged in it. My folks seem to be on Facebook, so that's where I hang out. But yeah, Frances Drost. You can just look for me there on Facebook.
I will put the links in the description just to make it easier for folks to find you. Frances, thank you so much for sharing your time with me and sharing your story.
Thank you. And I'd love to hear from your listeners if there's something that connects with them about, because this is a new, I'm spreading out the reach. Are there other people who understand this thing with the holidays? I'd love to hear from them and just know. So yeah, thank you for taking time and having me on.
Anytime. You're always welcome to come back.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button for my regulars. You guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network